Yo guys, Superior David here. Murder at Castle Nathria is about to release, or maybe it has already released depending on when you're watching this video. So that means it's time for me to give you 10 superior decks that you can play day one of the expansion. As always, I've got one deck for every class, and some of these lists will be on the competitive side, while others will lean a bit more memey. So hopefully there's something out there for everyone to enjoy. And if you do enjoy these decks, make sure to hit that like button. Also subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. I will be dropping a ton of gameplay videos just as soon as the expansion drops, so definitely want to check that stuff out. But in the meantime, let's get into these decks. So as is tradition on the channel, we'll be starting off with my favorite class, Druid, and I have for you today a variation on the Death Rattle Ramp Druid that I played in Theory Crafting. The general idea behind this deck is that we use Druid's Ramp and Managing to do just a bunch of broken things. And I think the ideal curve you're looking for here is Hedge Maze down on turn 3 into the Widowbloom Seedsman on turn 4. So that way, the following turn, you can play the Death Blossom Womper to draw either Cecily or the Stoneborn General, and then using the Hedge Maze, you'll be able to proc the Womper right then and there, and that gets you either like a lot of tempo or a lot of value. But beyond that, we have a lot of other scammy things we could do with this deck, because we've got the Kael'thas Sinstrider, who's looking so incredibly busted, and it seems like the move to do is to play Kael'thas Sinstrider, then you combo him with Bran Bronzebeard, and then you could play just a really big minion like the Sire Denathrius to be able to proc that very powerful Battlecry twice. We could also do some spicy things like play the Primordial Protector to draw like double Convoke the Spirits to get 2 10-drops on the board. Just really crazy stuff. Anyways, to bring this deck all home, we've got the Topior, the Shrubagazer. Once you get this card down, it just makes all of your nature spells that much more powerful. Overall, Druid's looking pretty nasty in Murder at Castle Nathria, and this seems like a really fun deck if you just want to just test out those broken Druid shenanigans. Now, moving on to Hunter. I have for you a Wild Seeds Hunter, which was just a ton of fun to play in Theory Crafting. This is basically like a mid-range Hunter list where we want to curve out aggressively, and then we want to just weave in those Wild Seed cards when we can. Getting down those like early Wild Seed cards like the Spirit Poacher and the Stag Charge are really powerful, so that way when like you draw the Wild Spirits, you can potentially just wake up those Wild Seed cards a bit faster and get just like a ton of pressure on the board out of nowhere. And then to give this list a little bit more I decided to throw in the Kazakus Golem Shaper just because, wasn't running any 4-drops, so it felt good in that regard. But then in addition to that, since the Wild Seed minions are dormant and they wake up on a later turn, it seems like just having ways to buff minions is at a premium for this deck. So, you see we got like the Doggy Biscuit and the Ramming Mounts, but I feel like with Kazakus, you could potentially hit the minion buff Golem, and that just seems really filthy in this deck. Seems really powerful. But other than that, Wild Seed Hunter's looking like a relatively straightforward deck. So if you're looking for something that's simple to play yet very fun, I think this is going to be the day one deck for you. Now, moving right along to Mage, I have for you an XL Skeleton Hero Power Mage. So yeah, this deck's doing a whole bunch of stuff, but it's all like really fun things. And the Skeleton package felt really good in Theory Crafting. You got like the Nightcloak Sanctum to sort of stall games out, the Cold Case to give you some more sustain, then like the Deathborn, which is just like another AoE in Mage's arsenal to help stabilize in those mid-game turns. But then, you could also turn that AoE into damage with the Skeleton, so just really flexible stuff and really good stuff. Then like with the Druid deck I mentioned, you could take things to the next level with the Kael'thas Sinstrider, because you can go like Kael'thas with the Bran, and then you can play either of the 2 big bombs in this deck, those being the Mordresh, of course, or the new Kel'Thuzad, the Inevitable, and this allows you to just get like a lot of burst face. And overall, I think this deck is going to be very powerful just because Mage was pretty good before, and essentially the Skeleton package is giving Mages a little bit more support and a little bit more extra damage, and that makes it easier to just close out games. So loving this archetype. Okay, so next up we've got Paladin, and I have for you a Pure Control Paladin. So the big payoff for playing Pure Paladin at the moment is the Countess. Playing against this card a bit in Theory Crafting, it felt more like a fun card rather than a competitive card, but man, the silly stuff you can do with the Countess, it was hysterical. Like absolutely some of the scammiest stuff if the planets align. But there are some other very powerful cards in this deck, like the new Elitist Snob, which seems like the much better payoff for going pure Paladin in the expansion, because it's tempo, it's healing, it's just a good defensive tool, very obnoxious for like any aggro deck to deal with. But I think the best new card may actually be the Buffet Biggin, because its infused cost of 3 is just so easy to meet in this deck. You're going to be able to get this card infused off on curve, I feel like in most games. It's just, again, you just curve out, boom, you could play this card infused on turn 4. So that seems really good. But overall, I feel like Paladin is still just going to get carried by like the Lightforge Carriel, because Carriel's going to still be very good. And I think with the better early game minions, I think it's going to be easier to hit that Carriel on turn 8. You're going to survive a lot more often now. So you better get ready to tech in those Rustrot Vipers to absolutely scam those Paladins again. Now, moving on to Warlock, I have for you my best deck from Theory Crafting, and that is Imp Warlock. Imp Warlock was feeling just absolutely disgusting because you've got really powerful explosive early game tools with like the Flustered Librarian, and you can back that up with the Vile Library to just represent like a lot of damage out of nowhere, because you could just follow all that up with Fiendish Circle on 3. Fiendish Circle might be one of the more broken Warlock cards now. It's sort of silly how that happened. But of course, I've got to mention the Impending Catastrophe, which I think is going to be just going into every Warlock deck just because it's so easy to like throw in like a Wicked Shipments to get like a ton of draw for like 2 mana. I will not be surprised if this card gets nerfed. And then to just back all this very powerful early game up, we've got the Imp King Rafam, which can be a whole board in a card, but if you infuse him, which is very easy to do in this deck, he buffs all of your imps, not just the ones you summon, just all of your imps by +2/+2. So that could actually give you some more reach as well, which is very nice. I will not be surprised if this archetype receives like multiple nerfs by like week 2 of the expansion. So just keep all that in mind. Okay, now moving right along to Shaman, I have for you my take on Evolve Shaman. The general idea behind this deck is that we're control Murloc free Shaman, and we sort of use the Evolve package to have some early to mid game scams. And I think that this is going to be the way to build Evolve Shaman rather than going like all in on the Evolve package, because this way you still have a very versatile deck. With the freeze package, you're going to be able to beat like any other like Evolve Shaman that's going all in on Evolve stuff. And then with the Murloc package, you're going to be able to draw through your deck and get like a lot of stuff on the board. So you will have targets to evolve. And if you want to make this deck real mean, you could honestly probably just throw Mutinous in, and that would probably help you out more against like control decks just to eat their win conditions. But I didn't want to be like that mean day one out of the gates. So I think this list here incorporates enough of the like fun Evolve stuff that people like know and love when they play Evolve Shaman, while also sort of maintaining like the good powerful Shaman cards that will win you like just a ton of games on ladder. So if you want a powerful day one deck that isn't Imp Warlock, then I think this is going to be your deck. Okay, so next up is Rogue, which I totally didn't forget to film the other day. But anyways, I have for you my take on the Miracle Rogue archetype that's definitely getting pushed very hard in the expansion. And the idea behind this deck is that you want to play like a bunch of cheap spells with Gadgetzan Auctioneer on the board, so you can keep cycling through your deck to play even more cheap spells. And then you end your turn by making a huge stealth minion with the Sinstone Cemetery, or you make a big old weapon with the Draka. Now, generally speaking, these like glass cannon style of combo decks look very strong out of the gates day one of the expansion, but over time tend to fall off as people start refining their decks a bit more. But for day one, I think this deck will just be a blast to play, so definitely want to check this one out. Okay, so next up we've got Demon Hunter, and I have for you a Relic Death Rattle Demon Hunter. The idea behind this deck is that you want to use your Death Rattles to get pressure on the board, and I think like the Razor Boar and the Razorfen Beastmaster will help you like empty out your hand, so you can get like some nice reload with the Magnifying Glaive. But also, you know, you could potentially cheat out the new legendary, the Crixus the Voracious, which again, you really never really want to play with this deck. I think the idea here is that you're going to be cheating this out. And while you're doing all these Death Rattle shenanigans, you're also weaving in your relics, just slowly but surely getting them just increasingly more powerful and powerful throughout the game. So you could just drop the Artificer Zymox and just like sort of wipe your opponent out with that big tempo swing that you could generate if you can infuse him. So all in all, it feels like Demon Hunter's getting like little bits and pieces of archetypes like here and there with this expansion. And I think it's going to just be like a matter of like which new stuff works best with the old stuff, and that's going to be like the good Demon Hunter deck. And I don't know, I'm really excited to jam this like day one. I haven't played Demon Hunter for a while now. I think this deck's going to just be like a real fun time. Now moving right along to Warrior, I have for you like a mid-range Enrage Warrior deck, and the idea here is that we run like a bunch of minions that gain a bonus effect like when they're damaged or are damaged. So we got like some familiar faces in the archetype like the Frothing Berserker and the Acolyte of Pain, but also some newbies into the bunch like the Anima Extractor and the Crazed Wretch, both of which just feel so good. And then for some more mid-game snowball potential, we've got the Imbued Axe. I feel like most of the time you're probably not going to be playing this infused. I think that's okay though, because I think it's good on its own. But perhaps if you draw this like in the mid to late game, then you infuse it and you get that additional stat bonus, and then it's going to be really filthy in those situations. And then finally, for some more top end to close out games, we've got the classic Grom Hellscream, just great closer in Enraged style decks, but then also the new Decimator Olgra, which feels very filthy in this kind of archetype because she can hit your opponent in the face. Just absolutely like love this card. Just from what I heard from people in theory crafting, this style of Enraged Warrior that's like low to the ground and more aggressive was feeling very good. So I'm very anxious to check this one out day one of the expansion, just smork some fellas down on ladder. Now last but certainly not least, we've got Zeddy's favorite class, Priest, and I have for you my take on like a control style Thief Priest. Now the Thief package that Priest is receiving this expansion feels more fun than competitive to me, but to give this deck like more of like an actual win condition, I decided to put in like a pseudo blessed package with the Pelagos, the Partners in Crime, and then the Shadow Word Devours. It feels like these three cards could probably just go into like every Priest deck deck from now on, because together they represent just a very powerful win condition. Since like Pelagos, you just need to play the Shadow Word Devourer with some minions on the board, and then you could get like a giant minion out of nowhere. And then with the Partner in Crime, you could get 2 giant minions out of nowhere. So that just seems like really silly to me. So if I had to guess, I feel like the best priest decks will probably be the existing priest decks that just slot in like a couple of the new cards. But I think that there is some very spicy things being introduced to Priestess expansion, and definitely looking forward to checking them out and just absolutely doing some dirty things to my opponent on ladder. Gonna be very mean for sure. So there you have it, 10 superior decks that you can play day 1 of Murder at Castle Nathria. Let me know down in the comments what decks you'll be checking out day 1. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the new cards, definitely check out the video I just dropped where I talked about what I think will be the most broken cards in the new expansion. And in the meantime, you know, stay superior, and I'll catch you next one. Later.
Get that